probably two slides.
Two
And
slides. There it is. Yeah.
so, and thank you all for coming. We have some participants who are making their way in, and we will get started in just a few minutes. We have a lot of exciting information to share with everyone. If you would like to go ahead and put your name and your location in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to go ahead and get started as we're continuing to let people in. And I'm Patty Koval, the Director of Member Engagement and Learning for Virginia Funders Network. And again, thank you all for joining us today. We are excited for you all to learn more about the RAFT program. And as you can see, they are well represented here, so lots to share. But I also wanted to take a moment to thank Sari Raskin with the Community Foundation of Northern Virginia, Joe Maroon with the Virginia Environmental Endowment, and Lincoln Boykin with River County's Community Foundation, who were instrumental in setting up this session today. We will put their contact information in the chat along with bios and headshots for all of our different speakers as we go. And then just as a reminder, we will be sharing the slides, the recording, and contact information and other resources in a follow-up email that will either go tomorrow or Monday. So with that, Lincoln, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'm on mute. You'd think after 5 years that I'd have a handle on this by now. I thank you, Patty. I'm really excited for today's session, and I'm really excited that so many people are here to hear the work of the RAFT and our friends from around the Commonwealth who are engaging in this work. So, just as an overview of the process to where we are today, VFN members, we began our environmental learning journey at the annual conference in 2023 and continued with a follow-on session at the 24 conference in May, where we explored some on-the-ground projects that were focusing on climate and conservation. And so one of the panelists from that session, Elizabeth Armistead Andrews, is with us again today, along with several of her colleagues who are engaged in the RAFT around the Commonwealth. So after the conference, we sent out a survey asking our attendees why they attended the session and what they found most valuable. We had, let me see, 85% of the respondents said that they attended because of a desire to deepen their understanding of current environmental challenges, and they wanted to explore opportunities for collaborating with other stakeholders. Then 85% indicated that climate change mitigation and adaptation initiatives were very important to them, and they wanted to learn more about that. And 100% of them said that they would participate or encourage colleagues to participate in webinars and or sessions on environmental grant making. So here we are. That's why we're here today. So today's discussion will continue that conversation about the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool and its implementation in localities across the Commonwealth. The RAFT leverages expertise and resources of multidisciplinary partners and diverse stakeholders to assist localities and sovereign tribal nations striving to increase their resilience to climate change. Since 2015, the RAFT has worked with 26 localities in coastal Virginia, and it's recently begun adapting its model to work with localities in Southwest Virginia, as well as to support sovereign tribal nations. So today we have with us Tanya Dinkla-Cobb, Elizabeth Armistead Andrews, and Jessica Whitehead, who are with the RAFT core team. And Jay Grebe, Shannon Blevins, and John Bateman are representatives from localities that are currently engaging in the RAFT work in their communities. So we'll ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves and their roles as we move through the session. And then following the presentation, our friend Sari will facilitate a Q&A. So be sure to enter your questions into the chat during the program, or come off mute to ask a question during the Q&A portion. So we have a lot to get into today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tanya to start off the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Lincoln. And just a huge thank you to all of you for your interest and for this great opportunity for us to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing to help communities at the ground level increase their resilience. We have a lot to cover, so I think that's really mainly what I want to do. We're going to ask each of our people here to introduce themselves when they begin their portion of this presentation, and we'll look forward to answering your questions at the end. I do want to say one thing, that this what we're presenting, we've been in this 9 years and it continues to evolve. So just to say that this is not a fixed process that we're talking about. This is something that has just continued to adapt over time to reflect the emerging needs as we discover them. And with that, I will hand it off to Jess.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Hello, everyone. My name is Jess Whitehead. I'm the John P. Brock Endowed Executive Director of the Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience at Old Dominion University. My expertise and background is in planning and implementing climate change adaptation at the local level. I've worked all up and down the East Coast. I'm now based in Virginia, and I've also been a state chief resilience officer, though again, not in Virginia. So I was really excited to get to join the RAFT team when I came to ODU 3 years ago. And the RAFT really occupies a very unique space in what is now a resilience ecosystem that is emerging in the United States. We've gone from 10 years ago trying to convince everyone that building a resilience to climate change is a need, to actually figuring out how to do it on the ground in communities. But it can be really challenging to get started, particularly in rural areas, in small communities, and in getting the community engaged. So the RAFT is rooted in a real triple bottom line approach to resilience, where we are improving this ability to not just recover from, but to actually improve our baseline conditions overall and adapt across not only environmental stresses, but also economic and social stresses in communities, recognizing that climate change is not happening in isolation from all of these other issues that you're dealing with. And it's a 3-university collaborative that brings boots on the ground into these communities through 3 steps. It starts off with taking a both quantitative and qualitative look at a community based on evaluating existing plans that are in place within a community, but then also conducting interviews, not just with folks who work for a locality, but in key community groups and real knowledge holders within the community, people who are trusted local resources, and understanding what their perceptions and needs are. From there, the RAFT convenes a workshop with everyone from local government to those organizations to share the results back and have the group themselves set the priorities for what can be done over the next year. We have also now, within the last 2 years, started to pilot how this works with tribes in Virginia. We've worked with both state-recognized and federally recognized tribes to adapt this process to include tribal ecological knowledge and other kinds of indigenous knowledge, as well as to acknowledge that not everything in a tribe is written down. So how do we develop that assessment for that space? And then we continue to convene that group as an implementation team over the next year to help them make progress on those actions that are identified, with ongoing support and assistance from the 3 universities. This is really unique, I think, in certainly in Virginia, and not necessarily very common in the United States, in that it truly does put the community in the driver's seat. We've seen resilience planning nationally become professionalized. There are a number of small consulting firms up to major national consulting firms who can go in and do a resilience plan for your locality. They'll do your quantitative risk assessment, they'll provide you with your recommendations, they'll hand you your report, and then the contract is over and they leave. What RAFT and the university approach provide is this real chance to convene the community with the universities as these neutral parties. We're a little bit better able to, in contrast to somebody who is a paid private sector contractor, dig into things that don't necessarily fit under billable hours and negotiate those community conversations, negotiate those conflicts within communities, and turn those into a strong network within the communities where we work. It really is about connecting those silos. We know that it's extremely hard to get things done in communities. It's so tough to think and collaborate with others who are outside your own office. But the RAFT provides a platform through the ongoing implementation to do that and to provide that technical assistance. And that IT implementation team support continues. In the past, it's been up to 12 months, but now with the support from VEE in particular, we've been able to extend that in some of the communities where we're working up to 18 months. So where has the RAFT been in Virginia? It really started out as a coastal process, specifically driven by tidal flooding and sea level rise. But that pilot now has moved and continued to evolve as we move throughout Eastern Virginia and now further inland, even to Dickinson and Carroll County in Southwest Virginia. And as we do that, we're also adapting the scorecard. What originally began with focus on coastal flooding now includes elements like extreme heat. It's also being expanded to think about energy in communities, particularly in Southwest Virginia. So the process continues to evolve as the community needs evolve. So from there, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth Andrews to talk about the next few slides.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you everyone for having me back. I spoke with you all back at the last session in May, and I'm really excited you invited us back. I'm Elizabeth Andrews. I'm with the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation at the University of Virginia. One thing I stressed in my prior presentation, and that Jess just did a beautiful job of going over again, is how the RAFT gets down into the grassroots. And it's a community-led process. And as I'm sure you all know, it takes time. It takes time to build trust in the community, and it takes time to actually do this work. And a good example is in Virginia, we had our first round of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, and they had some excellent private sector contractors who honestly said, we don't have the capacity to get down in the grassroots for the outreach. We can't under this contract. It's going to take a lot more effort than that. It's a big lift. And so I think one thing we're very happy about and proud of with the RAFT is how we do try to get down into the community through the qualitative assessment and the focus groups and the interviews, and through this building of a resilience checklist for each community. The RAFT has a scorecard with 5 different categories. And what you see here in this lovely chart is a breakdown of how much of our work that we do with these communities in response to their list, their requests, falls under each of these different categories: leadership, emergency management, infrastructure, resilience, community engagement. That the community engagement, health and well-being is often a category that's a little more surprising to local governments. They don't think of that as much as falling under this umbrella of resilience. And then planning, of course, is key. Jess, would you mind advancing? Thank you. So what do? We have some examples for you. And it's also great to go over these to show you the kinds of connections we build, because we have a 3-university partnership. You're going to hear a little bit more later about how we're going to be firming up our ability to bring in faculty. They could be from other schools as well who are interested in doing this type of work. And we also connect communities to state agencies as well. So the communication channels that we create There's some examples for you of state agencies that we've worked with. A representative of the State Department of Forestry, for example, said that his involvement on the Eastern Shore with the RAFT was the best experience he had for finding projects that he could work on. We're excited to hear that. We connect the communities with providers of support. The Green Infrastructure Center came up with some tree canopy plans to help out some communities and some green infrastructure plans for downtown areas. The Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professionals Program, the certification program, Catholic Charities, Veteran Services, you could see food banks and shelters. In one conversation I will never forget in a locality, we figured out in an implementation team meeting that the food bank was open on Saturday and the local bus transit system didn't run on Saturday. And there's this moment of silence. We all just looked at each other like, why has that dot not been connected to that dot before? But it's often just everyone's scurrying to get their jobs done and don't have time for those conversations. And then law and policy analysis for localities. We looked into responsibilities and authorities of dunes authorities. The Eastern Shore had many towns that wanted to know how they could take care of their flooding issues because the counties are the ones responsible for submitting the list of projects to VDOT. Well, we couldn't fix some of their severe flooding problems in 1 year. So we brought in a team. VDOT was amazing. And they brought in folks from the headquarters downtown in Richmond and from the Eastern Shore and met with the communities to talk through with them. How could they how could they get dollars to spend on their smaller profile tasks? And we actually explained to them as well in a policy analysis how the Smart Scale program works too. Would you mind advancing the slide, please, Jess? Thank you. Some more examples. We try to address specific risks. One thing I want to stress is that the RAFT is also honestly an educational experience, an educational opportunity for the community. At the regional workshop, we try to present maps about predictive flood risk, for example. On the coast, we've worked with VIMS, Virginia Institute of Marine Science, to do that. And we try to get them as much planning and mapping help as we can. On Tangier Island, famous to all of us for how it's eroding, we did some work with them on trying to figure out the cost of some offshore artificial oyster reefs to be built to act as a breakwater, essentially. The town of Anancock they're higher than most communities. They had a flooding harbor master's parking lot. Thanks to Sea Grant, we were able to get an intern with them, a fellow who worked with a private sector firm to come up with designs that they were able to then implement when they had an off-the-shelf design ready to apply for a grant to get it built. And so they were thrilled about that. And then we had some mapping. An Old Dominion University professor did some mapping of shoreline erosion for the town of Colonial Beach. We also addressed specific risk management needs. A very small example is the town of Whitestone. It has a lot of elderly residents who are not on the internet. They don't have good reception for either internet or for phone. And they were trying to figure out, how do we contact our elderly residents in times of emergency? Well, thank you, Lincoln, with a call that was placed. He agreed to fund emergency radios. And, it may be that sounds archaic, but that's what met the needs of that very rural community. So thank you. And because, again, on the Eastern Shore, they have so many homes that are rented as vacation rentals in Cape Charles. They had no luck when they put flyers in the mailbox to talk about evacuation routes and to talk about, do you know your evacuation zone and what to do? They would blow away, they get rained on. So we printed magnets that could stay on the refrigerator and be there no matter who was in the home, whether it's the owner or a renter. Could you forward this one more time for me, please, Jess? Thank you. So for infrastructure resilience, we connect the experts for specific infrastructure resilience plans to help these communities figure out how to mitigate their flooding problems. And that includes green infrastructure, parks. The town of Whitestone got a green infrastructure plan from the Green Infrastructure Center. We try to cover many different topics. And we have coordinated community workshops responding to the needs of a particular community. They have asked for help with how to build resilience into comprehensive plans, how to deal with saltwater intrusion into wells and inundation of septic systems, the tree canopy plans, et cetera. So we try to be responsive to what the community wants. And we help them by developing a list of opportunities that they could look at, but it is completely community-led in the decision-making. Okay, next slide, Jess. Thank you. And we also have analysis and education that we provide. The routes for residents to access green spaces, food to increase food security. We provide them with vital resources for physical health resilience and also to support with mini grants, which I'm hoping that Jay or others will talk about as well. We had a strong mini grant program thanks to the DuPont Fund that helped us to provide actual funding to community groups hands-on to achieve change, including, frankly, helping the Mattaponi tribe with repair of their fish hatchery for one thing, community food garden, Just Harvest. So I'm going to toss the baton to Jay later to cover that. And I think that's it for, no, one more for me, I think. Or is that back to you, Tanya?
I think this might be back to me. So I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm Tanya Dankla-Cobb. I'm director of the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation up at UVA. I am a public policy mediator and facilitator and design. I'm a process wonk and love to design processes like this for success. So moving on to the largest category that has really been requested by localities that we've worked with is in this category of planning. And so the things that we've done here are very planning oriented, like drafting and sometimes just reviewing for them policies and plans around specific elements. And it could be in their comp plan, it could be local codes and ordinances. We've helped them develop an emergency communications plan, review an emergency operations plan, work on a water supply plan. It's just this is a common need. And then also developing a range of options for adaptation. And so, for example, in Chincoteague, there was a beach relocation analysis that we did. And then there's a downtown infrastructure plan that was requested in Petersburg, I believe, that's been happening. So onward we go to the next slide. Thank you, Jess. So perspectives from partners are, we're going to kick off with Jay Grebe. And Jay, I'm going to hand it over to you at this point.
Hello, everybody. I am Jay Grebe. I'm the executive director of Just Harvest. And I'm here to sing all of the praises of the RAFT because Just Harvest actually would not exist if not for RAFT. I started my role with RAFT as a representative of the Rappahannock tribal nation. I'm a citizen of the Rappahannock tribal nation, and I was sitting in on these sessions to sort of have our voice heard and see what resources might be effective. Through these sessions, though, I met the three men who are now our board members, and we all sat together. We're having discussions. We outlined our priorities, and we decided that we're going to make a nonprofit. And RAFT is like, oh, you're going to make a nonprofit? That's amazing. We're going to support you in making a nonprofit. So we got a lot of support in terms of finding community partners. We got a lot of support in forging that mission and finding I apologize, my brain ran away with me. So we got a great deal of support on the front end of things, meeting and connecting with one another. We got support in creating these meetings where we had time outside of the actual RAFT meetings to connect with one another and forge a mission and decide what we wanted. And what was fantastic about the whole process is that at no point was it a top-down model. RAFT was here to ask us what we needed. I can't tell you how many emails I got during this process where they're like, how can we help you? What do you need? Do you need us to sit in on meetings? There was never this is what you should be doing. This is how you should do it. We were the community members, and that was always an understood that we were the ones who should be driving the bus when it comes to building community resiliency. We were the ones that should be creating the plan forward, and that outside entities really don't have the same knowledge or the same connections to make real impactful change. So I found that incredibly different, I guess. And the other thing that was exceptional about the RAFT process, as opposed to some of the other groups that we've worked with in the past, is that it was the first opportunity to break down the siloed approach toward community building, toward community resiliency. you can't fix one part of an individual's life and expect everything to be better elsewhere. You can't fix one problem in a community and expect everything else to be better elsewhere. Like, you can put a Band-Aid on this one thing. It doesn't impact the whole of it. It doesn't improve the overall situation. And RAFT sort of got that from the very beginning. So they brought stakeholders in from all of the different areas to talk to one another and have authentic conversations and really build a plan that was meaningful and holistic. So shortly after Just Harvest was formed, we hit the ground running, but we had no funding. We had lots of people who were like, oh, we'd love to work with you. Can you bring us community programming? Can you do educational workshops? Have you guys considered doing this? Have you guys? And we're like, we would love to do all of those things. We have $0 to do those things right now. And our first round of funding came from those mini and micro grants. And they were very helpful, sort of ushering us through the process. We had no idea. Now, it's 2 years later and it's a whole different world. We have over 20 community partners, and those are active community partners who we're interacting with like on the daily almost, to make sure that we are maximizing our outreach, sharing the resources that we should be sharing, and getting as much done as we can possibly get done in the timeframes that we have. And RAFT is the reason all of that exists. RAFT is the reason that we now have grants from BDSS, BDH. RAFT is the reason that we have a partnership with the community college. We have partnerships with libraries. We have partnerships with Wildfire Foundation. Like, I can go through just this extraordinary list of resources that we now have at our hands that we never would have had access to had we not been formed through the RAFT process. And we've made, I believe, I'm going to toot our own horn for a minute. Within the last 2 years, we launched a community garden in downtown Essex, where we have hosted multiple workshops for the community. And we had a cultural and educational exchange event just this past year. And we had over 100 participants come into that, where we had knowledge bearers from academia, knowledge bearers from lived experience, all in the same space. We had intergenerational discourse, everybody discussing what it is they need and how to get there. And that was a really amazing opportunity for everybody, and it was very enlightening for us. We also launched heritage gardens out at Minokan. Those are gardens dedicated not towards just producing food that gets donated into the community. It also tells accurate historical narratives about the natives and the enslaved humans of the region. We also have a mutual garden in Caroline County. We have an educational garden with Richmond County Elementary Schools. We've done a series of workshops. Last year we did 900 pounds of food distribution directly into community hands. And this year we've already passed the 1,000-pound mark of food distribution. And we have so much other programming, but I'm just sort of babbling on and on and on. So I don't want to keep dumping that on you, but I can't sing the praises of RAFT enough with the bottom-up thinking that they have embodied, and the community empowerment is at the core of what they're looking to do. And that has been, that made all the difference for us. That's what made us happen. That's how we exist as an entity today.
Thank you so much, Jay. Really appreciate that. I promise we did not pay her to say all that. Because Shannon needs to hop off, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon next, and then we'll go to John.
Thank you, Tanya. It's a pleasure to be with you all today on the Zoom room. I can speak just a little bit about kind of the how much I appreciate RAFT and the process of looking at just a systems approach to community and economic development. So as I think in the intro, it was mentioned that RAFT has been adapted from looking at more of the coastal issues to thinking about what are some of the challenges that exist in the mountainous areas of the state. And so to a lot of great work done by the people on the Zoom room today, that has been adapted to be able to have an application here in our area of Southwest Virginia. So think about where I sit today. I sit in Wise, which is right in the heart of the Appalachian Regional Commission's kind of designated area, Central Appalachia, but in the heart of coal country. And so when you think about perspectives in this area. There is a wide variety of opinions around climate, climate change, climate impact. And our communities are dealing with many impacts related to just the changing climate. Flooding is a particular one that has been somewhat devastating to some of the communities in this area. And we're looking at just for the next couple of days, with the effects of the hurricane. Looking at flooding potentially right here in our face in the next couple of days. But when you kind of think of the broader approach that the RAFT process brings to our communities is looking at community resilience. And for us in the coal region, community resilience is broad. You're looking at, access to healthcare. You're looking at access to food. A lot of the things that overlap with the social determinants of health. And that's one of the things that in our area we're really focused on is trying to move the dial, move the needle on some of our metrics related to just health, related to educational attainment, related to economic development. So RAFT kind of comes in with an opportunity for us to evaluate in an objective way where we stand in our communities. And we have our first opportunity on this side of the state to work with the RAFT team in Dickinson County and Carroll counties. Both of those counties have been incredibly receptive to the process, and the team has been incredibly respectful to the culture. Our culture is quite unique as across the entire state. Cultures are unique, but I think one of the great things about this process is there's a real sensitivity and a respect for the culture in which the RAFT process is going to go to work, and having the community leaders guide and develop even the process for adapting the RAFT. That has been very much influenced by stakeholders in the region that really understand the issues that are at play. So I'm excited as we move forward in implementing the RAFT in these two communities. The hope is that we will right-side or be able to tweak the RAFT even further based upon feedback that we continue to get and how well we kind of implement that in Dickinson and Carroll and continue to refine and implement those strategies and be able to replicate it across additional communities. And one of the byproducts of this process for Southwest Virginia is also really looking at the opportunities for renewable energy. In fact, all of the above energy opportunities in our region. This region has been the energy region of the Commonwealth for decades, and there's a real opportunity for this region to continue to be the energy region of the state, but looking at all forms of energy. And so there's a team that backs up the RAFT team, also looking at in an objective way, what are those opportunities so that our communities will have more knowledge and have context by which they evaluate a lot of renewable energy opportunities that come their way. So I'm excited. We are just getting started. Again, the communities of Dickinson County and Carroll County have been incredibly receptive. They're excited about what will come out of the RAFT process. And we've enjoyed working with our colleagues across the state as we continue to adapt the RAFT for our mountainous communities.
Thanks so much, Shannon, and thank you for staying a little longer. Really appreciate it so much. It's really important to represent that part of the state. Anyway, thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah. And so, John, it's up to you and me to bring it home under the wire here. And John, I'll turn it to you, and then I have a couple of slides after you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. John Bateman, Economic Development Director and Assistant County Administrator with Lancaster County, Virginia. I spent the previous 10 years as a Senior Regional Planner for the Northern Neck Planning District Commission, and I hope to give to you some examples today about how the Northern Neck approached resilience planning and implementation through the RAFT that differs from many other approaches that you may have seen across the state. Like many different localities in Virginia, especially rural localities, the localities of the Northern Neck rely on a regional process, like an entity like the Planning District Commission, to do its hazard mitigation planning. With the advent of resilience planning, hazard mitigation is more reactionary. We needed a more proactive approach to how we deal with the many challenges that we face, whether it's coastal flooding, pluvial flooding, economic resilience, and the like. So we needed a holistic and organic approach, something that didn't create another plan. That can be a very daunting process for a rural locality with limited capacity. So we in the lead into our hazard mitigation plan update process, we pursued the RAFT as a way of facilitating, convening community partners in addition to the local government administrations to take a real wide look at resilience and what resilience meant to each one of those communities. We had 8 localities, 4 towns, 4 counties participate in the RAFT in the Northern Neck. Each one of them are unique in their own challenges and their own strategies and how they pursue planning and implementation. So we needed a process that wasn't one size fits all, but also could get it done in one felt swoop. So the RAFT really provided that, and whether it's the engagement and convening of IEN or the helping us with the actual hazard mitigation strategies that differ from other localities through ODU, we were able to understand what resilience meant to each one of those communities, what strategies that they thought would help them achieve their goals of resilience, and then worked through the RAFT process to build those out. Eventually, we were able to take those strategies and incorporate them as resilience strategies into the hazard mitigation plan, making that regional hazard plan something that's both a hazard mitigation plan and a resilience plan. And you may or may not know that these plans have to be adopted by the local government elected bodies. And so we were able to create this plan. It was then adopted by these local bodies. In one felt swoop, each one of our localities had a resilience and hazard mitigation plan. Now, a lot of this work was done with the anticipation of funding through Virginia's Community Flood Preparedness Fund to implement projects that actually help to mitigate and create resilience. So one of the core requirements of that implementation funding was that you had to have an adopted resilience plan. So our approach as a region was to utilize that regional hazard mitigation planning process to create a resilience plan that could then be adopted by all the localities. In my current capacity at Lancaster County as the county administrator, we were able to adopt that plan as our local resilience plan. We were able to crosswalk with the help of ODU our comprehensive plans and our capital improvement plans with the hazard and resilience plan to identify projects, to prioritize those projects, and then to seek funding, whether it's through FEMA funding, through BRIC, or the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And one particular example I want to give you, and this is one that I had in mind 6 or 7 years ago when we started this process, was a resilience project in Westland Beach out in Windmill Point in Lancaster County. It's an area of high erosion, lots of coastal flooding. You had private residential properties that were being impacted right next to a marina, right next to a public beach property. And so we were able to, and are currently in the process of implementing a resilience project that's going to be a complete beach restoration, dune restoration project, installation of breakwaters to protect both public and private property, with a return on investment of about $3.22 for every dollar spent. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to procure any state or federal funding for the project, but because we went through this detailed and methodical planning process with the help of RAFT to identify the projects that were the highest priority and then pursue them, the local government and their elected officials have no problem prioritizing and funding such a project and putting their own investment into that project. So I just want to paint the picture that the RAFT was able to allow us to have kind of an organic, holistic approach to resilience planning that didn't create another plan, that wasn't a huge burden to the local governments that had a limited capacity, and is now being implemented in such a way that it's going to create the resilience that we desired. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Very exciting to hear about Windmill Point. Very, very exciting. Jess, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this slide and just move to the next one. If there's time, I can always come back, but I want to end with this slide, which is ways to support the RAFT are many and various, and it could be that we are next going to be working with the historic triangle localities of Williamsburg, County of York, and James City County in the Hampton Roads Planning District. Support for that effort. If you're interested in supporting work with the sovereign nations of Virginia, that's an opportunity. Last would be also in Southwest Virginia, so much work is needed. It's as Shannon said, it's there's only great need, and then also we are planning to circle back and offer opportunities to connect with faculty at various universities for the 26 alumni localities, and that can use support. As Jay talked about the mini and micro grants and how that supported Just Harvest, and Elizabeth talked about other things that were supported by the mini and micro grants. That is a way to do it where the funding goes directly to service providers or grassroots groups for implementing one of the resilience priorities. So there's many different ways. If you're interested, I would just say, let us know and we'll figure out what meets your goals and your objectives, and help find a way for you to support the resilience work in our state. With that, I'll close. Jess, you can go to the next slide. Yep, that's for our contact information. Thanks. So we'll open it for questions.
And I'd like to say hi, everyone. I'm Sari Raskin, and I want to thank Tanya, Elizabeth, Jay, Shannon, and John. I think I covered everyone. That was very informative and great, like crash course on the RAFT and how different. Thanks for bringing the different perspectives of higher ed, government, and nonprofit to the discussion, and giving us a full holistic view of how you've engaged in community. I'd love to hear if there are any questions. I don't know how many of the VFN members are actually on the call. I know this will be really helpful actually when it's sent out and for people to learn. There's a lot of information to process anyways. So I'd love to know if there are any questions. I have one question if there's not one, but I'm love to hear.
Go ahead, Sari.
Well, I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, so how would we start? In other words, how would we, if we wanted to create a resilience plan, right? There's so many potential, as a community foundation, right? We are a connector, right? We are able to connect with higher ed, nonprofits, the community that you've connected with actually to determine what community needs are. We also are those connectors, but it would be a nice partnership actually between community foundations and you potentially to kind of figure out what are the needs of a certain community to do that assessment. So I just wanted to ask about starting, and then it looks like Joe also has a question right afterwards. So just as a beginning, what would you recommend if a community foundation came to you or a funder came to you and said, okay, we want to look at what the issues are in our certain community? And I love the fact that I love John's example that basically there was the goal was to create a local resilience plan, right? So really sit with people and hear, okay, what are the issues that are the key issues, and let's help you be proactive versus reactive. And I think that's a key point for, at least for me as a community foundation.
Yeah, I think Jess covered this. Jess, do you want to talk about the first phase of our work, and the scorecard, and I think that's where we would start.
Sure. So that first phase, when we go into a community, we begin by looking at what plans are in place, whether it is, there's a comprehensive plan, there's probably a regional hazard mitigation plan, if there are local emergency operations plans, green infrastructure plans, stormwater plans, those sorts of plans. And we have our team go through and look for certain elements of those plans that we know are indicative of something that helps you with resilience. It provides you with a score. It's not like getting a grade in school. It's not meant to be a punitive score or, oh, I got an A, what did you get? But it does provide you with a quantitative metric, specifically across the categories within the scorecard of where are you already doing really well, and where are there places where you could score some more points, and that's where you need to focus. So it helps with that prioritization, and it also, as opposed to the resilience planning processes, say if you go to DCR and do a resilience plan where you have to check the box to have a debris management plan, and you have to check the box to have natural and nature-based features, and you have to check these boxes. This is much more flexible in terms of looking at where you are and what you think the people who are at the table with you can get done in a year. So it's similar and different, very, very different at the same time in terms of that getting started in the community. And that's, again, we're coming in and having that community in the driver's seat, working with potentially a community foundation to make sure that you get all of the right people in the room, that they're willing to come to the meetings, that they're trusting you, that we're holding meetings at a time when people can actually attend. All of these other pieces are ways that we can improve that community engagement in the process, specifically as you're prioritizing what you think you can do, and then making motion toward getting those things done over the 12 to 18 month period.
Great. Thank you very much. Joe, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentations and great testimonies from the three folks that you had speak as well. And really, my comments are from the perspective of a funder that's been involved with the RAFT project from the very beginning. We've had the opportunity to see the impact in all of the different communities that they've been engaged with. And really, as the team pointed out, the uniqueness of bringing together the three universities who are perceived as not having their own agenda, but rather want to know what the communities really want. And so it was really a great lead in for me. Just talked about the phase one and the upfront planning part. What our board has focused in on has been the back end, the third step, if you remember from that slide, the implementation of the projects that have been identified by the community. So there's usually a pretty long list. And frankly, we are able to fund a portion of those, but never able to fund all of them. And so one of the things that I think could be a real help, and maybe Tanya or others might want to comment on that, is just that, bringing these plans to life is so important. And that's where implementation is really involved. And so this is a very community-oriented, locally driven process. And so if you are a small funder and you happen to be in that community or near that community and want to make a difference, I can think of no greater way to do that than to join in with the help with the implementation projects that maybe the VEE funds or some other funders aren't able to help with. So that was all, again, that we just think that this is a great program, and just commend all of the RAFT team in all that they've done and will continue to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any other?
Thanks, Joe.
Any other questions?
If I could just add to that very quickly, thank you, Joe, for that. And he's exactly right. When each community develops their checklist of things to do to become more resilient, that's when a foundation that has a particular focus or area of interest could step in and say, that need for affordable housing on higher ground really resonates with us, or something about food security really resonates with us. So the things on the checklist could be extremely diverse, all kinds of different topics, because we do have a scorecard that covers so many topics.
And that came out very clearly, that it's about identifying and assessing the needs of a specific community, and that not even realizing before you walk into a process how relevant it could be to your community. And I love the examples that were given around adapting, right? Recognize you may walk in with some examples, but your community may look really different once you figure out who your community is and what the needs are and the realities are. And I love the idea, like looking at the different plans that already exist, of course, and figuring out what already exists and what needs to be created. Thank you.
Exactly. Thanks.
I'll add to that, and this kind of dovetails in with what Jess was saying. You know, a state and federal led processes like hazard mitigation plans are very prescriptive. They're one size fits all approaches. And what it leads a small rural community to do is to take that plan and put it on the shelf and say, these are unattainable goals. These are unattainable strategies. And that's because those processes are being led by local government officials, planners like me who think big picture. When we went through the RAFT, we had local community groups engaged. We had the Department of Social Services engaged. I want to believe at one point in time, River County's Community Foundation attended a couple of those meetings. The Red Cross attended the meetings. And when you have that kind of diverse stakeholder group and that kind of diverse engagement, it really brings up and rises to the surface some of these smaller issues that impact segments of the community that are often neglected or forgotten about. And that's to me where real resilience planning and implementation needs to occur, is on that small scale with community members. You know, you can do the large scale stuff and you can plan for the moon, but really there are community issues that affect lots of individuals that get forgotten about in the process. And RAFT was able to help us bring those people to the table to get that input and feedback.
Thank you. There's a question: is the RAFT team keeping a scorecard, an inventory of communities where organizations or folks are convening to utilize a scorecard? So looking at the communities that you've already engaged in, and then as a community starts to utilize a tool, when should or could you be brought in as a partner?
Great question. And there is something that we have not mentioned. There's so much we could talk about, but we haven't yet mentioned this thing called the PREP tool, which was requested of us to reorient the scorecard away from the independent scoring that the universities do to a self-scoring process. That would lead to their own, resilience priorities. There was great hope by those who requested us to put this together that it would be used. And to date, it has not been able to be used because even the communities that wanted to use it found that they didn't have the resources. So that's really been the issue, is that we're not working with the large cities that have the resources to do that kind of work. We're working with smaller, sometimes incredibly under-resourced, communities that have volunteer mayors and no staff, or counties that do have staff, but it's like one person who's doing zoning and planning and something else, and so they really just don't have the capacity. So far, even though this prep tool is available, really, it's only been applied in communities where we've been there from the beginning. And if you know of communities that are willing to go down this path and use the prep tool, we'd be very glad and would be happy to support it. And the answer then would be, once they have completed their self-scoring and identified their priorities, we could certainly come in and support doing a workshop, or simply be sort of consulting along the side of, here's the next step of how you do your workshop and how you might want to do your implementation. We'd be happy to talk to any community in that boat.
And if I could add to that, I saw John smiling and nodding at the concept of people wearing multiple hats in local government. What a funny idea, John. You have two titles. I think an important thing to note is it's also at the county level often a revolving door. It's not just that they don't have many staff members, it's the ones that they do have often are changing and moving. So if someone is passionate about doing the RAFT, whether it's the full-blown RAFT or trying the prep tool, unfortunately, they're often not there for many, many years. And so that passion might go out the door with them. And so one thing that's also helpful is to think about how to keep the momentum going after the RAFT process is done. in our alumni localities. That's another need too.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Patty to take us to the end.
Wow, that was great, fascinating. And while I have an extra second, I'm going to ask all of our speakers to, I think I mentioned to you all that we do send out a follow-up email with the recording, and we will include in the recording this time the Q&A since it had so much valuable information.